So can I start by asking you whether or not you've ever recorded your testimony before and what happened to you?
No.
Why?
I don't know.
Has anybody ever asked you before if you...
No.
No. Okay, so this is the first time you've been asked to officially record your testimony.
Yes.
And how much of your story do your family know?
Well, they know, but not with all the details.
And why not?
I don't know. I don't know. I was telling them, but never from time to time. At the contrary, I always said one should talk about it. And even my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, came from school and said, Grandma, tell us about it because we have to make homework. And they did make homework and they got an A for it. But not with so much detail, of course.
Mm. So why have you decided to talk about your experiences now?
Because they're talking a lot, and I know that Prime Minister started advertising it, that it mustn't be forgotten. So I said, why not?
And how do you feel about talking about your story today?
It makes me nervous. Not that I forgot, but probably I did forget some things. But it's upsetting. It's upsetting. Yeah, I just go through it somehow again.
And I guess one way to deal with what happened was just to try and move on and forget.
That's right.
And just the preparation for this interview and this recording has made you remember everything and made you feel uncertain.
But made me feel very nervous. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm frightened, but I remember more somehow. And 6 years in Russia is not a picnic. And of course, it was in Germany, but it was haunting us that we'll never get out from there, because it has been known that once you're in Russia, you never get out.
I know that the researchers who've come to see you have said that you found it very hard to talk about things, and your daughter certainly said that you've been finding it difficult to sleep in preparation for today.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that, but we're very grateful that you have decided to talk to us. Is there anything that you want to talk to me about before we start?
Not really.
No? Okay. So we'll just take it slowly. As I said, I've got all the information about your life, so you don't need to worry about remembering everything when I ask you a question, because I'll lead you through everything. And we'll start with your family. And if you could explain a little bit about where you were born and the family that you were born into.
I was born actually in Italy, the town Gorizia. My parents, after the wedding, not straight away, I think, because my brother was still born in Poland. They were Polish. My parents both were born in Auschwitz. The Germans called it Auschwitz. But Auschwitz, the camps were outside the town. In Auschwitz, both families lived, my both parents. It was a lot of Jewish people lived there, about 16,000, maybe I make a mistake, but that is in my mind that I heard. And after a few years, I was, I don't know exactly, 5, 6. My mother decided she's homesick, and we went back to Poland. There we moved in. My grandfather had a big building in the center of the city, and we moved in to this building. Each apartment was family, so it was a nice family life. And both grandparents lived in the same building. We started school, we didn't know the Polish, so we were told we mustn't talk any other language but Polish, and that's how I picked up Polish and still speak Polish. And it was a nice life with family in the whole building. Matter of fact, the building was the nicest in center of the city. When the German came, they occupied, the Gestapo was in the building, in the apartment of my grandfather, they were there. So I was told anyway.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about your siblings? Because you had
I had a twin sister.
A twin
I have a
sister.
twin sister. She lives in Jerusalem. My brother unfortunately died in a car crash. We emigrated to Italy, and he stayed on there. And there he got killed 22 years ago.
So going back to your apartment and the block of flats that you lived in, you were with a large number of your family, and
Yeah.
that must have been a lovely,
It was a lovely,
wholesome experience, and
That's
you
right.
must have felt very safe.
yeah.
Tell me about your school and what you remember about your school life.
Well, we went to Polish school. There were no Jewish schools in Poland mostly. Yes, we were happy, but the Polish people were not very nice to Jews. But we accepted. We thought it has to be like this. That's it. Nobody ran away. There was nowhere to run. We were very young. I was only 11 when the war broke out. And
Were you a religious family?
yes, we were very religious.
And you were part of a very big Jewish community?
Yes, yes.
How did you show that commitment?
Well, we kept all the Jewish holidays. We ate only kosher. And we had mostly only Jewish friends because they didn't like us and we didn't like them because of that. And we had the cousins in the building, my aunties, uncles, and all.
Would you go as far as to say that the Polish people around you were anti-Semitic towards you?
Definitely.
What examples of that would you give me?
Well, they were always fighting us, insulting us. We couldn't even go to the teacher to report them because the teacher was not different. But they didn't fight that, they didn't kill us, but they were not nice to us.
And this was all in the build-up to the war, wasn't it?
Well, this is what I remember, but there was always a jealousy as well. The Jewish people somehow, that was they thought. They were poor people as well. But they thought they're all rich, but they were not all rich.
And what about the atmosphere in the town towards you and your community? How
Well,
was that?
To me, I don't remember. I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
But people lived, had businesses. It wasn't a bad life. We went on holidays. Those days one didn't travel abroad. We were on holidays in Poland.
In the build-up to the war, you clearly as a family started to feel unsettled because someone in your family came up with a plan. Can you describe and can you remember what that was all about?
First it started, there was a blackout. One wasn't allowed to use light. So the windows that they put black paper. The cars couldn't travel in the night, evening, because you couldn't put on the lights. We didn't know what's going on, what's going to happen. It was something cooking, but we didn't know. And we came back just from holidays, summer holidays. And my grandmother said to us, why don't you go to Krakow, which was a bigger town, over the Sabbath, because we were near the German border. We don't know what's going to happen, but maybe you go. My father had 2 sisters married, living in Krakow. And my mother said, I already cooked for the Sabbath. What shall I do with it? And my grandmother said, take it with. And this was on Thursday, on 31st of August, 1939. And we decided, shall we go, shall we not go? Okay, we'll go, but we can't go in the evening because we can't use the lights. We'll go in the morning. 5 o'clock in the morning we left. 1st of September, 1939. My mother, my father drove. And my sister, my brother, and we had a domestic, and she said she doesn't want to stay behind. She's frightened. She came with us. We drove, and suddenly we saw planes and the bombs started falling down. We didn't expect the war. We didn't know what's going to happen. Eventually, a police or army, I don't know exactly, stopped us and asked us if we have any bombs in the cars. They were not very clever, the army. They didn't know. They came from the sky, the bombs, and they were looking for bombs in the cars. Anyway, they let us go. We arrived after 2 hours in Krakow, and there were the bombs already. Krakow is a bigger town than Oswiecim. The bombs were falling off non-stop. My auntie was waiting for us. There were no air shelters in Poland. There was nowhere to hide. And they were talking about that they're throwing as well gas bombs. They were frightened that something terrible is going to happen. The whole Sabbath were bombing and bombing. On Sunday, we decided with other people that we must leave town. We can't stay in the town, it was too dangerous. And we left walking. The trains didn't go, the cars didn't go. The car was confiscated and sent back. The army took it over. And we started walking. And every time there was planes going over, we were hiding. We were hiding on the trees, on the bushes. We were going through forests. We didn't know where we were going. We left with just a rucksack, few things, a bit of food, that's all. And we didn't have even money because we came for the Sabbath. We didn't need any money, so we didn't have anything. Sometimes just bombing took such a long time that we used to fall asleep. We were still young children. My brother was 13, was already the older one. On the way, we stopped. It was Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. And we met Jewish farmers, which we didn't even know existed. And they took us in. And they gave us to eat and to sleep on the floor because we were too many people. Then, middle of the night, suddenly the doors were banging. They said the police ran away. It means that the Germans are behind. We had to run again. I think before this still we stopped in a town, Tarnów, where a sister of my mother lived, and few people came with us as well, so we were already more people. And then my father met old acquaintance, and he sold him a horse with a carriage, but a lame horse. That's why the army didn't take it. So we were already so many people. There wasn't enough room for everybody. So the nights the children slept on it, and at daytime the older people were resting on it. But we were going on and on, through forests all. But with us people, thousands of people were going, walking. There was no food. Eventually we went from one place to another. Eventually my mother said, it's enough, where are we going? Let's stay. It was a little town, not a village. Still a lot of Jewish people, and they took us in and gave us to eat. And we said, we are staying. Whatever happens, we are staying. We can't go walk anymore. After a few days, the Germans came. My father spoke German because Oswiecim used to belong once to, I think, Austria or Germany, and the Jewish people knew German. So we are leaving in 3 days because Poland has been divided between Russia and Germany. And my father said he doesn't know what to do because we knew that you don't get out of Russia. But if we stay, Of course, nobody had an idea what the Germans really are. So he asked the soldier was a higher, what do you think we should do? He said, well, you can't walk back because there are bandits in the forests. But if you stay, you won't be able to get out of Russia either. But we stayed. They left, and for a few days they were shooting. The partisans and the communists, whatever. Some were happy the Russians were coming, some were not happy. So we didn't go out of the house where we stayed. Eventually the Russians came. We didn't really know the Russians. We only knew that you can't get out of Russia. And they didn't do anything. They gave us even a lift to the next station because the station was closed and there was no connection. We knew then that we want to go to a bigger town. And the next bigger town was Lvov. Anyway, eventually we went to Lvov by train. We arrived there. Where shall we go? Where shall we find an apartment? We met a brother of my father, youngest brother. He was deported. He was run away as well from the bombs. And we asked him, what do you think? Where can we find somewhere to live? And he said, well, wherever you see broken windows, go in because it means that people run away. So nobody said, go in and then you'll see. And that's what we did. But we had nothing. We had no money, no clothes, nothing. And like we were like this, there were a lot of people. So people started going illegally back on the German side to go home to fetch clothing, money. My mother wanted to go as well, but my father was terrified of the Germans and didn't let her go. The Russians heard about it, and they didn't like it. It was like an insult to them that they were running back to the Germans. They didn't know that they were just going to fetch things. So suddenly they announced, you don't need to go illegally. Whoever wants to go back, we're putting special trains and we'll let you know. But who wants to go back, we are opening special offices and you come and register your name and address and we'll let you know when the trains will be ready. We didn't know the Russians. After, I can't remember, a few days, few weeks, suddenly in the middle of the night, the doors are banging and we knew, the trains are ready, come on quickly. We knew this is not what it sounds, but they were shouting, we had to go out. We had nothing to take with. They opened every cupboard, every door. But interesting, one door they didn't open where an elderly auntie stayed with her husband, and we thought, a miracle. We left, and they were there. We came to the station. There were thousands of hundreds, I don't know, people waiting. We were all waiting till they all were collected. But we knew already that we are going to Russia. Then we knew already. We couldn't run away. It was full of police. Eventually, they put us on a train. It wasn't a passenger train, it was and I started going. We were 3 weeks in the train. We arrived. And they put us on a barge, another few days. When we arrived, middle of nowhere, just a forest, and two people were waiting for us. One was a baker, and one was a commandant who was in charge. I remember a stupid thing, but I remember my mother said, there's a children's book, Robinson Crusoe, I don't know if you know. I can't remember exactly as well. They got lost or accident, and they met only two people, Robinson Crusoe. We saw two people waiting for us. We got off, It was just a forest and a row of little houses, just one-room houses, which were divided with a fireplace to make it 2 rooms. In the front garden, they were growing potatoes. This, the Tsar built already. This was prison. This was the whole place of prison. You couldn't run away. There was no one to run. There were only forests. The nearest place to go was 12 days walking. So with us was one brother of my mother, with a wife and 2 little boys. They were with us, but my uncle was clever. We ran away from the bombs, got stuck in Lvov. But he was in Warsaw, and while we were already in Lvov, he hired a bus, loaded whoever wanted to go over to the Russian side, and came over to Lvov. And he found us. Till today I never asked how they knew where we are. So we were together. And they were the only survivors from the huge family, this uncle, auntie, and the 2 cousins. My uncle, auntie died already. My auntie died a few years ago. She was 102. But the 2 sons are alive. They're younger than me. They live in Canada. They emigrated to Canada. So we had at least some kind of family. The men were sent to work. There was nothing else, just cutting trees. It was cold, Siberia. It was a healthy climate because there were no, everything got killed, all the things. But was nothing to do. They opened a school, Russian school. And one day they wanted to send away the men to work because there was nothing to do there. And my mother said, oh my God, they'll send them away, we'll never see them again. It has been known that there are written books about it. What can we do? Hide. Where can we hide? There's nowhere to hide. There were no buildings or anything. There were no shops, nothing. But then we found a trapdoor in the entrance of the room. So they went down. For a few days they were there. Eventually they came again, and they knew this area. They knew the houses, so they came and went straight to the trapdoor and said, "Come out," and put them to prison. It wasn't even a proper prison. There were no buildings there. It was a shed. There were other people there, fathers with sons and son-in-laws, all Jews. We didn't know what's going to happen. At night, my brother and me went to take some food to them. We were small children, and we thought, if they catch us, what will they do to children? If my mother goes, they'll arrest her as well. So what will you do? There was a little window there. So we used to throw some food inside with a long stick. But my mother thought, we have to do something. Then she had a whole thing, doctors, they pretended to examine the people that they were sending away. They said they were all right and so on. And one of them was a woman. So, well, we have got nothing to lose. She, with my auntie, went to this doctor woman and said, look, we are foreigners, we didn't know. Can you help us? What can we do to get them out? And we'll see you right, or something like this. So she said, well, can you let them know they should pretend to be ill? And I'll take them to a hospital, even there wasn't a proper hospital. They start making tests, eventually it will calm down, and let them send them away to work. It is not far from here, so you don't need to worry. That's what we did. And my auntie gave her, I didn't know till last year what actually they gave her. She gave her a nightie of silk nightie, embroidered. And the Russian doctor thought it was an evening dress. So poor they are there. There were no shops at all. Money was no point to give, not that we had, because you couldn't buy anything. And so what you said, you have to let them know. So we have to write them a letter and throw in the letter. And my mother said, we have to write in a language that they can't read. Well, the Russians have interpreters, but in Siberia, will they have? So my mother knew, because we lived in Italy, she wrote in Italian. And my father knew Italian as well. And that's what they did. They wrote an Italian letter, do this and this. And they let them out. The other people didn't let them out. We never heard about those people, what happened to them. But she said, don't worry, they're sending me away. It's only 12 hours walk from here. It's not far. So we had no choice. At least they were out of prison. They went there, and then my father let us know. It was already a bigger village, and the commandant there was a Jewish fellow, a Russian Jew from Moscow. So he was as well sent to Siberia. So they sent him to work. But whatever he did, I don't know. And he even arranged that we could transfer to be together with father and uncle as well. And so we couldn't walk, we were children, 12 hours. We waited till the barge was passing, there was no timetable. So we always sent somebody to stay at the water, see what's coming, and then we asked them, can they take us with? But it took a long time because the commandant in the place where we were, every time when he lets them go quickly, so we can't go on. Eventually we went on. It was more pleasant, it was already a village. And the commandant was very nice to us because he was happy that he had some Jews. And he took my father in the office. I didn't have to go start cutting trees. School, I don't remember that there was a school. And there were as well other prisoners there. They were called Olga Deutsche. Volga is a river in Russia. And those were originally German, but already born in Russia. When they were sent there, I don't know, but they were prisoners. And they started conversation with my father in German. My father spoke German as well. And they always said, don't trust the Russians. Don't believe them anything. We didn't know what was going on in Poland. We didn't know what was going on in the world. We had no papers. We had no radio. We only heard what the Russians said, but we didn't believe them. We said, it's propaganda, we said. We can't believe what they're saying. They were saying what the Germans did, but we didn't believe them.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to take you back a little bit, just because there's a couple of stories that I just want to just go over. We're talking, you're 12 and 13, you're in Siberia.
Yeah.
And if we could just talk a little bit more about how long you were in Siberia for and the conditions that you were in. And if you could include the story about the tablecloth.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
whenever you're ready. So how long were you in Siberia?
In Siberia, we were about 18 months, 2 years, something like that. And it was very cold, but it was a healthy climate.
Where were you living? What was the environment like? And how did you feel as a family?
Well, we worried. We didn't know how long we'll be there, what will happen. We didn't know anything, what's going on in the world and with the family. We had no post, and we didn't believe anything what the Russians were telling us in the news and so on. We didn't have a radio. We didn't have newspapers. And whatever they said, we said, it's propaganda. It's not, it can't be true. They were saying what the Germans were doing. Nobody could believe it. There were no shops. One couldn't buy anything. We were getting bread from the government. We didn't have any meat or fish. The only vegetables were potatoes.
You've explained a lot about the different steps that your family went through and all the different places that you went to, but you haven't told me very much about how you were feeling, because all of this, you were still a child. I mean, at this point you were 13.
Well, we were frightened. We were frightened that this was the main thing. We were frightened that we'll never get out of there. And then when my father eventually was sent away and we joined him, it was better because we felt they can't send him away again. And we had this Jewish commandant, which somehow made us feel safer. And he was happy that we were there because he was deported as well from Moscow. And we lived as well in a house, just one-room house, together with my uncle, auntie. We were not very long there. Altogether, the two places, it was Siberia as well. And as I said, so how do we know what's going on? What I'm not sure who how do you say it? Started it off about the dreams. My brother was 2 years older than us. He must have heard something that one can translate dreams. So every morning, what did you dream? What did you dream? Oh, you dreamed fish. Oh, this is good. This is post. Oh, this is good. After a while, I said, it's enough with the dreams. It doesn't really help us. We still don't know what's going on. Let's stop it. My brother said, no, wait. You have to listen to this dream because this is a different dream. So, what is it? Well, I dreamt that a bird knocked at the window, and this is good news. And while he was saying this, there was a bird on the window. It is true. I still remember it. And we started screaming, look, there is a bird. We were not even dressed yet. My brother got dressed and ran in the village. This was already a village, a bit better than the first place. He came back after a while and he said, the people are dancing in the street. What happened? Germany attacked Russia. And actually they had a pact that they are not going to attack them. But they did. And we are free to leave Siberia. Not Russia, but Siberia. So the bird was right. It was good news. And then we started. And then when the commandant heard this, he called my father and he said, listen, where are you going? We didn't know where can we go. We couldn't go to the European part of Russia because they were already fighting. Or at least they were not far from there. We could only go to the Middle Asia. Where should we go? So the commandant called my father and said, listen, where are you going? It's war. How about staying here? I will look after you. You stay in the office. I take your children as pupils to the office. You'll have to eat and to sleep. And when the war finishes, you'll go back. My father said, well, I'll think it over. He called about 100 of the Jewish refugees and said, so what shall we do? Maybe we should stay. Maybe he's right. But then he met those Germans, the Volga Germans, and they asked him what. I said, are you crazy? You know the Russians. Today you can go, tomorrow not. So my father made another meeting, and he said, maybe he's right, we don't know. He went to the commandant and said, I'm sorry, this was already a day or two gone. I can't help you anymore. If you want, you can go to the main town, I think it was Sverdlovsk, to these offices, and ask, they should give you permission to leave. So a few men went, and it has been known that those days they only had big watches. Today is fashion, but those days fashion was small watches. So this was all European people. They had the men throw all watches. So each of them took the watch with and bribed them there, and they gave them permission to leave the place. And he was going to fetch us, but to get to the station was 12 hours walking. It was still snow. Don't know what month it was, but it was still snow. He was good with the commandant, and he let him know he should tell us that we have to go ourselves. So we are going. So we had a bit of luggage. Main luggage was a sack of potatoes. We didn't move without it because we couldn't have anything. A bit we had already, but you can't carry it. So the commandant gave us a carriage, a horse, and one of the people that were in prison virtually to take it. My brother went with, but he shouldn't steal it. When he left, we were going to walk with my mother and the rest of the people, the 100 families. Afterwards, my mother said, you know what, I'm crazy. For that bit of potatoes, a bit of rubbish that we have, I sent my son with one of those Germans. I must have been crazy. She went to the commandant. Can you ring the station if they arrived? And she kept on going, and they didn't arrive, and we didn't know what happened. Eventually, they arrived midnight, and we started walking. The station was one little room. This was the whole station. And we could always take over one carriage. Any station, they gave us a carriage. The carriage was put on the next train. Where we were going, we didn't know, just out of Siberia. Every station, my father looked out, can you see anybody? Any foreigners? There were no shops, no coffee shops. The only thing that the Russian station had at this time was a tap with hot boiling water that you used for drinking. Eventually, one station, he sees a Jewish man. He recognized he was a European. And he asked him, who are you? He was from Poland, from Trzebina. How is it here? Is there a lot of Jews? Is there food? Yes, it's very good. You should get off. But by the time he was ready to go on the train and get us off, the train started moving. So, okay, we'll get off next station. Next station was 24 hours later. We got off, we didn't know where. I don't remember if it was Tashkent or Turkestan, one of those two, which was already Uzbekistan and not Kazakhstan. They were all republics, little countries that belonged to Russia. And they're all Muslims. So we found with one Muslim family, they gave us a room. In the middle of the night, they used to come in looking around our things. So we asked, what do you want? They want cigarettes. Eventually, my father said, he will go back, find accommodation, and then he'll come to fetch us. It's silly, we should all go. There was another couple with a child as well with us. Not my uncle. My uncle left. When they say one can leave, he left before us. Eventually, after a few days, a young man came who my father met. The town that my father went back is called Kselorda. It's a big town. It's a known town, Kselorda in Kazakhstan. He met my father and he said, listen, I'll go and I'll fetch your family. A Polish-Jewish young man. And he came and he fetched us. We had a room with a Russian woman. And she even had in the kitchen animals. But we were happy. We felt a bit free. And in the beginning, we didn't go to school there. We were a bit not under supervision. We could move around. There were a lot of refugees with us. And Xyloda is a big town, and it is divided like the city and the suburb. We lived in the suburb. And to go to the city, you had to cross the station. There was no crossing, proper crossing. You just have to go through the trains, through the railway things. Then we had to queue for bread, even we had rations. I remember I always queued middle of the night to have a place. Eventually they open the shops and you'll be there the first ones or so. But often, till you got to the shop, it was sold out, so you had to start queuing somewhere else. Once I was 24 hours out of the house. I decided, I was still young, I was a teenager, I'm not going back without bread. So I went in the city. I can't remember that I went somewhere because I didn't know anybody, even people that did live in the city. Eventually I got something. And I was going to cross the station back, and suddenly I found my brother. Where are you? Where are you? We didn't know what to think. I said, here, I've got something. I wasn't tired, I wasn't frightened. We went back.
You were in Kazakhstan for 4 years, weren't you,
Yeah,
as a family?
4 years.
And although it had been very, very hard, I guess you were all still together, and you'd heard lots of stories of what was happening to other Jewish families that weren't still together.
Just in town.
Yeah.
Not out of town, we didn't know anything. Just in
There
town.
must have been lots of rumours. You must have worried about what was happening to other long-distant relatives or friends from your hometown.
Yes, that's why we started with the dreams, because we didn't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
But this was still in Siberia.
Yes, I know.
This was still in Siberia. There, we didn't hear anything different.
Okay, so you were in Kazakhstan for 4 years, and still things were very, very difficult, weren't they? But you started studying, didn't you?
Well, first we had a neighbor. So once he asked a Jewish Russian, how come you are not sending your girls to school? And my mother said, well, they'll go to school when the war finishes, we'll get home and then they'll go to school there. He said, the war finished, you don't know when the war is finished. He was a headmaster of an evening school. This was already high school. He said, look, if you want, we missed a year's schooling. I helped them to catch up, and they can come to my school, but it's in the evening. My mother said, in the evening, I'm not sending out young girls in the evening. He said, look, the school starts 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they can come. I'll bring them home every evening. So we went. Then after a few years, they opened a Polish school. But this was the refugee arrangement, but it was from the government. But they didn't have teachers. So the parents became teachers. So it was a low standard school, really. But it was an advantage. We spoke Polish. And we were between us, let's say. The Russian school were mostly Muslims. But funny enough, a lot of teachers were Russian Jews in this school. So we went to, one was an evening school, one was a morning school. So in the beginning, we went to both schools.
But after everything that had happened, this was when your life was starting to get a little bit back to normal, wasn't it?
Well, if you can call it normal.
Well, it wasn't normal, but it was certainly better than it had been.
Yeah, but it was always in my mind, will we ever get home? And what's going on? What's going on?
What did your family do for money at this stage? And was anybody able to work?
No.
So what did you do for money?
We didn't spend anything more than for bread. Still in Siberia, tablecloth. We didn't have milk. There was only one woman that had one cow. But money had no value. So we did, not that we didn't have it, but you couldn't buy anything. So we had, my grandfather, beginning sent us a parcel to Siberia, and he sent us this tablecloth. So my mother said, I gave her the tablecloth. One day she came and she saw it on the bed. It was a damask with a pattern in lilac. And she saw it, it's a bedspread. It can't be a tablecloth, that she'd never seen it. So she saw it on the bed. So we had for a few months milk.
So you'd swap the tablecloth for milk, hadn't you?
Yes, that's right.
That was back in Siberia.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about 1945, the 8th of May.
It was end of war, but we couldn't get home yet.
Do you remember when the war ended? Where were you? Do you remember being
we were in
told?
Siloda. We were still in Kazakhstan.
Do you remember finding out that the war had ended?
We knew it. We knew it had ended, but we didn't know how. So how shall we get out of there? So we need to get out of this town and get to Moscow. So we bribed the station master because there were trains going with the army to Japan. There was still war, whatever it was. And they were coming back empty. But there was no timetable. They didn't know when they're coming back. So we organized 100 people. We waited at the station 24 hours. Eventually the train arrived middle of the night. We told our friends what we are doing. We still kept the room. And we boarded the train. When we arrived on the train, the police came and got us all out. The men did put to prison, and the women did go home. So we still had the homework to go.
Before you carry on with that part of the story, can we just go over the part of the story where the Russians wanted Polish people to become Russian citizens, didn't they?
This was in Xiloda, yes, before this, yeah.
If you could tell me the story about your grandmother and her gallbladder.
My mother.
Your mother?
Yeah.
Okay.
Suddenly they wanted we should become Russian. Well, we knew if we are Russian, we definitely will never get out. But people, if they refuse, they send them right away to prison. And there's no hope. My mother even had friends, a younger couple, very known family.